they deserve this painful torment because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed books to his messenger, Muhammad, and the prophets before him, and these revelations bring about truth and expose falsehood. Yet, they took Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's signs for mockery. Their books ordered them to announce the truth and to spread the knowledge, but, instead, they defied the knowledge and rejected it. This final messenger Muhammad called them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, commanded them to work righteousness, and forbade them from committing evil. Yet, they rejected, denied and defied him and hid the truth that they knew about him. They, thus, mocked the ayah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to his messengers, and this is why they deserve the torment and the punishment. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said here. That is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent down the book, the Quran, in truth. And verily, those who disputed about the book are far away in opposition. 177 It is not birth that you turn your faces towards east and or west. But birth the one who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the last day, the angels, the book, the prophets. 494. And gives his wealth, in spite of love for it, to the kinsfolk, to the orphans, and to all masakin, the poor, and to the wayfarer, and to those who ask, and to set servants free, performs as-salah, aqamat as-salah, and gives the zakah, and to fulfill their covenant when they make it, and to are patient in extreme poverty and ailment, disease, and at the time of fighting, during the battles. Such are the people of the truth and they are all, mutakin, the pious. All piety, righteousness. This ayah contains many great wisdoms, encompassing rulings, and correct beliefs. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is not birth that you turn your faces towards east and or west. But birth the one who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the last day, the angels, the book, the prophets. As for the explanation of this ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first commanded the believers to face Bayt al-Maqdis, and then to face the Kaaba during the prayer. This change was difficult for some of the people of the book, and even for some Muslims. 495 Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent revelation which clarified the wisdom behind this command, that is, obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, adhering to his commands, facing wherever he commands facing, and implementing whatever he legislates, that is the objective. This is taqwa and complete faith. Facing the east or the west does not necessitate righteousness or obedience, unless it is legislated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it is not birth that you turn your faces towards east and or west in prayers. But birth the one who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last day. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said about the sacrifices. It is neither their meat nor their blood that reaches Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it is the piety from you that reaches him. 2237. Abu al-Aliya said, the Jews used to face the west for their qibla, while the Christians used to face the east for their qibla. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, it is not birth that you turn your faces towards east and or west in prayers. Meaning, this is faith, and its essence requires implementation. Similar was reported from Al-Hasan and Arabi, bin Anas. Al-Thawri recited, but birth the one who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and said that. What follows are the types of 496 He has said the truth. Certainly, those who acquire the qualities mentioned in the ayah will have indeed embraced all aspects of Islam and implemented all types of righteousness. Believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that He is the only God worthy of worship, and believing in the angels, the emissaries between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messengers. The books are the divinely revealed books from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to the prophets, which were finalized by the most honorable book, the Quran. The Quran supersedes all previous books, it mentions all types of righteousness, and the way to happiness in this life and the hereafter. The Quran abrogates all previous books and testifies to all of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's prophets, from the first prophet to the final prophet, Muhammad. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's peace and blessings be upon them all. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. 497. And gives his wealth, in spite of love for it. Refers to those who give money away while desiring it and loving it. It is recorded in the Sahihain that Abu Hurairah narrated that the Prophet said, the best charity is when you give it away while still healthy and thrifty, hoping to get rich and fearing poverty. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and they give food, in spite of their love for it, to the miskin, the poor, the orphan, and the captive, saying, we feed you, seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's face only. We wish for no reward, nor thanks from you. 76:8-9. And by no means shall you attain unless you spend of that which you love. 392. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. And give them preference over themselves even though they were in need of that. 59:9. Refers to a higher category and status, as the people mentioned here give away what they need, while those mentioned in the previous ayah give away what they covet, but not necessarily need. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. The kinsfolk. 498. Refers to man's relatives, who have more rights than anyone else to one's charity, as the hadith supports. Sadaqah, that is, charity, given to the poor is a charity, while the sadaqah given to the relatives, is both sadaqah and sila, nurturing relations, for they are the most deserving of you in your kindness and charity. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded kindness to the relatives in many places in the Quran. To the orphans. 499. The orphans are children who have none to look after them, having lost their fathers while they are still young, weak and unable to find their own sustenance since they have not reached the age of work and adolescence. Abdurrazzaq reported that Ali said that the Prophet said, "And to all masakin, the miskin is the person who does not have enough food, clothing, or he has no dwelling. So, the miskin should be granted the provisions to sustain him enough so that he can acquire his needs." In the Sahihain it is recorded that Abu Hurairah said, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger said, "The miskin is not the person who roams around, and whose need is met by 1 or 2 dates or 1 or 2 bites. Rather, the miskin is he who does not have what is sufficient, and to whom the people do not pay attention and, thus, do not give him from the charity. And to the wayfarer is the needy traveler who runs out of money and should, thus, be granted whatever amount that helps him to go back to his land. Such is the case with whoever intends to go on a permissible journey. He is given what he needs for his journey, and back. The guests are included in this category. Ali bin Abi Talib reported that Ibn Abbas said, Ibn Sabal, wayfarer, is the guest who is hosted by Muslims. Furthermore, Mujahid, Sa'id bin Jubair, Abu Jafar al-Bakir, al-Hasan, Qatada, Ad-Dabhak, Izri, Rabi bin Anas and Muqatil bin Hayyan said similarly. And to those who ask. 500. Refers to those who beg people and are thus given a part of the zakah and general charity. And to set servants free. These are the servants who seek to free themselves, but cannot find enough money to buy their freedom. We will mention several of these categories and types under the tafsir of the ayah on Sadaqah in Surah Baqarah, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala willing. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement performs as-salah, ikamat as-salah, means those who pray on time and give the prayer its due right. The bowing, prostration, and the necessary attention and humbleness required by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement and gives the zakah. 501. Sa'id bin Jubair and Muqatil bin Hayyan have stated means the required charity, zakah, due on one's money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement and who fulfill their covenant when they make it is similar to those who fulfill the covenant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and break not the mithaq, bond, treaty, covenant. 1320. The opposite of this characteristic is hypocrisy. As found in the hadith. The signs of a hypocrite are 3. If he speaks, he lies. If he promises, he breaks his promise. And if he is entrusted, he breaches the trust. In another version, if he speaks, he lies. If he vows, he breaks his vow. And if he disputes, he is lewd. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. And who are patient in extreme poverty and ailment, disease, and at the time of fighting, during the battles. Means, during the time of meekness and ailment. And at the time of fighting, during the battles. Ibn Masud, Ibn Abbas, Abu al-Aliya, Barawal, Hamdani, Mujahid, Sa'id bin Jubair, al-Hasan, Qatada, Rabi bin Anas, As-Sudi, Muqatil bin Hayyan, Abu Malik, Ad-Dabhak and others have stated. Means on the battlefield while facing the enemy. And calling them the patient here is a form of praise, because of the importance of patience in these circumstances, and the suffering and difficulties that accompany them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best, it is He whom help is sought from, and upon whom we rely. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. Such are the people of the truth. 502. Means, whoever acquires these qualities, these are truthful in their faith. This is because they have achieved faith in the heart and realized it in deed and upon the tongue. So they are the truthful. And they are al-mutakin, the pious. Because they avoided the prohibitions and performed the acts of obedience. 178. O you who believe. Al-Qisas, the law of equality, is prescribed for you in case of murder. The free for the free, the slave for the slave, and the female for the female. But if the killer is forgiven by the brother, or the relatives, of the killed, against blood money, then it should be sought in a good manner, and paid to him respectfully. This is an alleviation and a mercy from your Lord. So after this, whoever transgresses the limits, that is, kills the killer after taking the blood money, he shall have a painful torment. 279. And there is a saving of life for you in all, qisas, the law of equality in punishment, O men of understanding, that you may acquire taqwa. The command and the wisdom behind the law of equality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. 503. O you who believe. Al-Qisas, the law of equality, is prescribed for you in case of murder, the free for the free, the slave for the slave, and the female for the female. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, O believers, the law of equality has been ordained on you, for cases of murder, the free for the free, the slave for the slave and the female for the female. Therefore, do not transgress the set limits, as others before you transgressed them, and thus changed what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ordained for them. The reason behind this statement is that the Jewish tribe of Banu an-Nadir invaded Qurayza, another Jewish tribe, during the time of Jahiliyyah, before Islam, and defeated them. Hence, they made it a law, that, when a person from Nadir kills a person from Qurayza, he is not killed in retaliation, but only pays 100 wasq of dates. However, when a person from Qurayza kills a Nadir man, he would be killed for him. If Nadir wanted to forfeit the execution of the murderer, and instead require him to pay a ransom, the Qurayza man pays 200 wasq of dates, double the amount Nadir pays in diya, blood money. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commanded that justice be observed regarding the penal code, and that the path of the misguided and mischievous persons be avoided, who in disbelief and transgression defy and alter what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, all cases, the law of equality in punishment, is prescribed for you in case of murder, the free for the free, the slave for the slave, and the female for the female. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement, the free for the free, the slave for the slave, and the female for the female, was abrogated by the statement life for life, 545. 504 However, the majority of scholars agree that the Muslim is not killed for a disbeliever whom he kills. Al-Bukhari reported that Ali narrated that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger said. 505. The Muslim is not killed for the disbeliever whom he kills. No opinion that opposes this ruling could stand correct, nor is there an authentic hadith to contradict it. However, Abu Hanifa thought that the Muslim could be killed for a disbeliever, following the general meaning of the ayah, 545, in Surah Al-Ma'idah. The four Imams, Abu Hanifa, Malik, Shafi'i and Ahmad, and the majority of scholars stated that the group is killed for one person whom they murder. Umar said, about a boy who was killed by 7 men. If all the residents of Sana'a, capital of Yemen, today, collaborated on killing him, I would kill them all. No opposing opinion was known by the companions during that time, which constitutes an ijma consensus. There is an opinion attributed to Imam Ahmad that a group of people is not killed for one person whom they kill, and that only one person is killed for one person. Ibn al-Mundhir also attributed this opinion to Mu'ad, Ibn az-Zubair, Abdul Malik bin Marwan, Izri, Ibn Sirin and Habib bin Abu Thabit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. But if the killer is forgiven by the brother, or the relatives, of the killed, against blood money, then it should be sought in a good manner, and paid to him, respectfully. Refers to accepting blood money, by the relatives, of the victim in return for pardoning the killer, in cases of intentional murder. This opinion is attributed to Abu al-Aliya, Abu Shadfa, Mujahid, Sa'id bin Jubair, Ada al-Hasan, Qatada and Muqatil bin Hayyan. Abdabak said that Ibn Abbas said. But if the killer is forgiven by the brother, or the relatives, of the killed, against blood money, means the killer is pardoned by his brother, that is, the relative of the victim, and accepting the diya, after capital punishment becomes due, against the killer. This is the AFW, pardon mentioned in the ayah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. 506. Then it should be sought in a good manner. Means, when the relative agrees to take the blood money, he should collect his rightful dues with kindness, and paid to him respectfully. Means, the killer should accept the terms of settlement without causing further harm or resisting the payment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. This is an alleviation and a mercy from your Lord. Means the legislation that allows you to accept the blood money for intentional murder is an alleviation and a mercy from your Lord. It lightens what was required from those who were before you, either applying capital punishment or forgiving. Sa'id bin Mansur reported that Ibn Abbas said, the children of Israel were required to apply the law of equality in murder cases and were not allowed to offer pardons in return for blood money. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said to this ummah, the Muslim nation, the law of equality in punishment is prescribed for you in case of murder, the free for the free, the servant for the servant, and the female for the female. But if the killer is forgiven by the brother, or the relatives, of the killed, against blood money. Hence, pardoning or forgiving means accepting blood money in intentional murder cases. Ibn Hibban also recorded this in his Sahih. Qatada said, this is an alleviation from your Lord. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mercy on this ummah by giving them the deal which was not allowed for any nation before it. Oh, the people of the Torah, Jews, were allowed to either apply the penal code for murder, that is, execution, or to pardon the killer, but they were not allowed to take blood money. 507 Oh, the people of the Injil, the Gospel, the Christians, were required to pardon the killer, but no deal was legislated. Oh, this ummah, Muslims, is allowed to apply the penal code, execution, or to pardon and accept the blood money. Similar was reported from Sa'id bin Jubair, Muqatil bin Hayyan and Arabi bin Anas. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. So after this, whoever transgresses the limits, he shall have a painful torment. Means, those who kill in retaliation after taking the diya or accepting it, they will suffer a painful and severe torment from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The same was reported from Ibn Abbas, Mujahid, Ada Ikrimah, Al-Hasan, Qatada, Rabi bin Anas, As-Sadi and Muqatil bin Hayyan. The benefits and wisdom of the law of equality. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. 508. And there is life for you in all cases. Legislating the law of equality, that is, killing the murderer, carries great benefits for you. This way, the sanctity of life will be preserved because the killer will refrain from killing, as he will be certain that if he kills, he would be killed. Hence, life will be preserved. In previous books, there is a statement that killing stops further killing. This meaning came in much clearer and eloquent terms in the Quran, and there is a saving of life for you in all cases, the law of equality in punishment. Abu al-Aliya said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made the law of equality a life. Hence, how many a man who thought about killing, but this law prevented him from killing for fear that he will be killed in turn. Similar statements were reported from Mujahid, Sa'id bin Jubair, Abu Malik, Al-Hasan, Qatada, Rabi bin Anas and Muqatil bin Hayyan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. O man of understanding, that you may acquire taqwa. means, O you who have sound minds, comprehension and understanding. Perhaps by this he will be compelled to refrain from transgressing the prohibitions of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and what he considers sinful. Taqwa, mentioned in the ayah, is a word that means doing all acts of obedience and refraining from all prohibitions. 180 It is prescribed for you, when death approaches any of you, if he leaves wealth, that he makes a bequest to parents and next of kin, according to reasonable manners. This is a duty upon al-Muttaqin, the pious. 509. 181 Then whoever changes it after hearing it, the sin shall be on those who make the change. Truly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-hearer, all-knower. 182 But he who fears from a testator some unjust act or wrongdoing, and thereupon he makes peace between the parties concerned, there shall be no sin on him. Certainly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is oft forgiving, most merciful. Including parents and relatives in the will was later abrogated. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, it is prescribed for you, when death approaches any of you, if he leaves wealth, that he makes a bequest to parents and next of kin, according to reasonable manners. This is a duty upon al-Muttaqin, the pious. This ayah contains the command to include parents and relatives in the will, which was obligatory, according to the most correct view, before the ayah about inheritance was revealed. When the ayah of inheritance was revealed, this ayah was abrogated, so fixed shares of the inheritance for deserving recipients were legislated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, deserving inheritors take their fixed inheritance without 510 the need to be included in the will or to be reminded of the favor of the inherited person. For this reason we see the hadiths narrated in the Sunan and other books that Amr bin Kharija said, I heard Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger saying in a speech, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given each heir his fixed share. So there is no will for a deserving heir. Imam Ahmad recorded that Muhammad bin Sirin said, Ibn Abbas recited Surah al-Baqarah until he reached the ayah. If he leaves wealth, that he makes a bequest to parents and next of kin, he then said. This ayah was abrogated. This was recorded by Sa'id bin Mansur and al-Hakim in his Mustadrak. Al-Hakim said, it is Sahih according to their criteria, al-Bukhari and Muslim. Ibn Abu Hatim reported that Ibn Abbas said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement of bequest to parents and next of kin was abrogated by the ayah. 511. There is a share for men and a share for women from what is left by parents and those nearest related, whether the property be small or large. A legal share. 47. Ibn Abu Hatim then said, it was reported from Ibn Umar, Abu Musa, Sa'id bin Musayyib, Al-Hasan, Mujahid, Ada Sa'id bin Jubair, Muhammad bin Sirin, Ikrimah, Zayd bin Aslam and Rabi bin Anas. Qatada, As-Sadi, Muqatil bin Hayyan, Tawus, Ibrahim and Nakhai, Shuray, Abdabhak and Az-Zuri said that this ayah, 180 above, was abrogated by the ayah about the inheritors. 47. The will for the relatives that do not qualify as inheritors. It is recommended that the remaining relatives who do not have a designated fixed share of the inheritance be willed up to a third, due to the general meaning of the ayah about the will. It is recorded in the Sahihain that Ibn Umar said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger said, it is not permissible for any Muslim who has something to will to stay for 2 nights without having his last will and testament written and kept ready with him. Ibn Umar commented, ever since I heard this statement from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger, no night has passed, but my will is kept ready with me. There are many other ayah and hadiths ordering kindness and generosity to one's relatives. The will should observe justice. The will should be fair, in that one designates a part of the inheritance to his relatives without committing injustice against his qualified inheritors and without extravagance or stinginess. It is recorded in a Sahihain that Sa'd bin Abu Waqqas said, 512 O Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger, I have some money and only a daughter inherits from me, should I will all my remaining property to others? He said, no. Sa'd said, then may I will half of it? He said, no. Sa'd said, 1/3? He said, yes, 1/3, yet even 1/3 is too much. It is better for you to leave your inheritors wealthy than to leave them poor, begging from others. Al-Bukhari mentioned in his Sahih that Ibn Abbas said, I recommend that people reduce the proportion of what they bequeath by will to 1/4 of the whole legacy, rather than 1/3, for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger said. 513. 1/3, yet even 1/3 is too much. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. Then whoever changes it after hearing it, the sin shall be on those who make the change. Means, whoever changed the will and testament, or altered it by addition or deletion, including hiding the wills is obvious, then the sin shall be on those who make the change. Ibn Abbas and others said, the dead person's reward will be preserved for him by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while the sin is acquired by those who change the will. Truly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all-hearer, all-knower. Means, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what the dead person has bequeathed and what the beneficiaries, or others, have changed in the will. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's statement. But he who fears from a testator some unjust act or wrongdoing, and thereupon he makes peace between the parties concerned, there shall be no sin on him. Certainly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is oft forgiving, most merciful. But he who fears from a testator some unjust act or wrongdoing. Ibn Abbas, Abu al-Aliya, Mujahid, Abdabhak, Arabi, bin Anas and As-Sadi said. Error. These errors include such cases. As when the inheritor indirectly acquires more than his fair share, such as by being allocated that a certain item mentioned in the legacy be sold to him. Or, the testator might include his daughter's son in the legacy to increase his daughter's share in the inheritance, and so forth. Such errors might occur out of the kindness of the heart, without thinking about the consequences of these actions, or by sinful intention. In such cases, the executive of the will and testament is allowed to correct the errors and to replace the unjust items in the will with a better solution, so that both the Islamic law and what the dead person had wished for are respected and observed. This act would not constitute an alteration in the will, and this is why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned it specifically, so that it is excluded from the prohibition that prohibits altering the will and testament mentioned in the previous ayah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best. 514 The virtue of fairness in the will. Abdur Razzaq reported that Abu Hurairah said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger said, a man might perform the works of righteous people for 70 years, but when he dictates his will, he commits injustice, and thus his works end with the worst of his deeds and he enters the fire. A man might perform the works of evil people for 70 years, but then dictates a just will and thus ends with the best of his deeds and then enters paradise. Abu Hurairah then said, read if you wish. 515. These are the limits ordained by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so do not transgress them. 229. 183 O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, that you may acquire taqwa. 184 Fast for a fixed number of days, but if any of you is ill or on a journey, the same number should be made up from other days. And as for those who can fast with difficulty, for example, an old man, they have a choice either to fast or to feed a miskin, poor person, for every day. But whoever does good of his own accord, it is better for him. And that your fast is better for you if only you know the order to fast. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you as it was prescribed for those before you, that you may have taqwa. In an address to the believers of the Ummah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered them to fast, that is, to abstain from food, drink and sexual activity with the intention of doing so sincerely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the Exalted alone. This is because fasting purifies the souls and cleanses them from the evil that might mix with them and their ill behavior. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned that He has ordained fasting for Muslims just as He ordained it for those before them, they being an example for them in that, so, they should vigorously perform this obligation, more obediently than the previous nations. Similarly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, 516. 517. To each among you, we have prescribed a law and a clear way. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had willed, He would have made you one nation, but that He may test you in what He has given you. So compete in good deeds. 548. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in this ayah, O you who believe, fasting is prescribed for you, as it was prescribed for those before you, that you may have taqwa. Since the fast cleanses the body and narrows the paths of shaitan. In the Sahihain the following hadith was recorded. O young people, whoever amongst you can afford marriage, let him marry. Whoever cannot afford it, let him fast, for it will be a shield for him. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then commands, fast for a fixed number of days, but if any of you is ill or on a journey, the same number should be made up from other days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states that the fast occurs during a fixed number of days, so that it does not become hard on the hearts, thereby weakening their resolve and endurance. The various stages of fasting. Al-Bukhari and Muslim recorded that Aisha said, the day of Ashura was a day of fasting. When the obligation to fast Ramadan was revealed, those who wished fasted, and those who wished did not. Al-Bukhari recorded the same from Ibn Umar and Ibn Masud. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, those who can fast with difficulty, for example, an old man, they have a choice either to fast or to feed a miskin, poor person, for every day. Mu'ad commented, in the beginning, those who wished, fasted, and those who wished, did not fast and fed a poor person for each day. Al-Bukhari recorded Salama bin al-Aqwa saying that, when the ayah was revealed, those who did not wish to fast, used to pay the fidya, feeding a poor person for each day they did not fast, until the following ayah, 185, was revealed, abrogating the previous ayah. It was also reported from Ubaidullah from Nafi that Ibn Umar said, it was abrogated. As Sudi reported that Miran narrated that Abdullah said about this ayah, it means those who find it difficult to fast. Formerly, those who wished, fasted, and those who wished, did not but fed a poor person, instead. 518 Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then said, 519. But whoever does good of his own accord, meaning whoever fed an extra poor person, it is better for him. And that you fast is better for you if only you know. Later the ayah, so whoever of you sights the crescent on the first night of the month of Ramadan, that is present at his home, he must observe some fasting. That month, 185, was revealed and this abrogated the previous ayah, 184. The fidya, expiation, for breaking the fast is for the old and the ailing. Al-Bukhari reported that Ada heard Ibn Abbas recite, and as for those who can fast with difficulty, for example, an old man, they have a choice either to fast or to feed a miskin, poor person, for every day. Ibn Abbas then commented, this ayah was not abrogated, it is for the old man and the old woman who are able to fast with difficulty, but choose instead to feed a poor person for every day, they do not fast. Others reported that Sa'id bin Jubair mentioned this, from Ibn Abbas. So the abrogation here applies to the healthy person, who is not traveling and who has to fast, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said. So whoever of you sights the crescent on the first night of the month of Ramadan, that is present at his home, he must observe Sawm, fasting, that month. 185. As for the old man and woman who cannot fast, he is allowed to abstain from fasting and does not have to fast another day instead, because he is not likely to improve and be able to fast other days. So he is required to pay a fidya for every day missed. This is the opinion of Ibn Abbas and several others among the Salaf who read the ayah. And as for those who can fast with difficulty, for example, an old man, to mean those who find it difficult to fast, as Ibn Masud stated. This is also the opinion of al-Baqarah, who said, as for the old man, person, who cannot fast, he should do like Anas, who, for 1 or 2 years, after he became old, fed some bread and meat to a poor person for each day he did not fast. This point, which al-Baqarah attributed to Anas without a chain of narrators, was collected with a continuous chain of narrators by Abu Ya'la Masili in his Musnad, that, bin Abu Tamimah said, Anas could no longer fast. So he made a plate of tharid, broth, bread and meat, and invited 30 poor persons and fed them. The same ruling applies for the pregnant and breast-feeding women if they fear for themselves or their children or fetuses. In this case, they pay the fidya, and do not have to fast other days in place of the days that they missed. 185. The month of Ramadan, in which was revealed the Quran, a guidance for mankind and clear proofs for the guidance and the criterion between right and wrong. 520. So whoever of you sights the crescent on the first night of the month of Ramadan, that is present at his home, he must observe Sawm, fasting, that month, and whoever is ill or on a journey, the same number of days which one did not observe Sawm, fasting, must be made up from other days. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends for you ease, and he does not want to make things difficult for you. He wants that you must complete the same number of days, and that you must magnify Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that is, to say takbir, Allahu Akbar. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most great for having guided you so that you may be grateful to him. The virtue of Ramadan and the revelation of the Quran in it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the month of Ramadan, in which was revealed the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the month of Ramadan out of the other months by choosing it to send down the glorious Quran, just as he did for all of the divine books he revealed to the prophets. Imam Ahmad reported what Talib bin Al asked that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger said. 521. The Suhuf, pages, of Ibrahim were revealed during the first night of Ramadan. The Torah was revealed during the 6th night of Ramadan. The Injil was revealed during the 13th night of Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed the Quran on the 24th night of Ramadan. The virtues of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, a guidance for mankind and clear proofs for the guidance and the criterion between right and wrong. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala praised the Quran, which he revealed, as guidance for the hearts of those who believe in it and adhere to its commands. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and clear proofs, meaning, as clear and unambiguous signs and unequivocal proof for those who understand them. These proofs testify to the truth of the Quran, its guidance, the opposite of misguidance, and how it guides to the straight path, the opposite of the wrong path, and the distinction between the truth and falsehood, and the permissible and the prohibited. The obligation of fasting Ramadan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, so whoever of you sights the crescent on the first night of the month of Ramadan, that is present at his home, he must observe Sawm, fasting, that month. 522. This ayah requires the healthy person to witness the beginning of the month, while residing in their land, to fast the month. This ayah abrogated the ayah that allows a choice of fasting or paying the fidya. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered fasting, he again mentioned the permission for the ill person and the traveler to break the fast and to fast other days instead as compensation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and whoever is ill or on a journey, the same number of days which one did not observe Sawm, fasting, must be made up from other days. This ayah indicates that ill persons who are unable to fast or fear harm by fasting, and the traveler, are all allowed to break the fast. When one does not fast in this case, he is obliged to fast other days instead. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intends for you ease, and he does not want to make things difficult for you. This ayah indicates that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed such persons, out of his mercy and to make matters easy for them, to break the fast when they are ill or traveling, while the fast is still obligatory on the healthy persons who are not traveling. Several rulings concerning the fast. The authentic Sunnah states that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger traveled during the month of Ramadan for the battle from Makkah. The Prophet marched until he reached the area of Qadr and then broke his fast and ordered those who were with him to do likewise. 523. This was recorded in the 2 Sahihs. Breaking the fast mentioned in this hadith was not required, for the companions used to go out with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger during the month of Ramadan. Then, some of them would fast while some of them would not fast, and neither category would criticize the others. If the command mentioned in the hadith required breaking the fast, the Prophet would have criticized those who fasted. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger himself sometimes fasted while traveling. For instance, it is reported in the 2 Sahihs that Abu ad-Darda said, we once went with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger during Ramadan while the heat was intense. One of us would place his hand on his head because of the intense heat. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger and Abdullah bin Rawiya were fasting at that time. We should state that observing the permission to break the fast while traveling is better, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's messenger said about fasting while traveling. Those who did not fast have done good, and there is no harm for those who fasted. In another hadith, the Prophet said, "Hold to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's permission that He has granted you." Some scholars say that